start the recording, turn on my camera and give you a proper welcome to class. So again, my name is John Meredith. I'm one of the technical trainers here at Sumo Logic. I'm based on the East Coast, based out of my home here in Bedford, New Hampshire. So what you're seeing behind me is my home office. So I believe in being as transparent as I can. So rather than putting some sort of a wallpaper, Zoom wallpaper type thing on there, I figure I'll let you see what's going on in my world. So been with Sumo a little over 2.5 years, and obviously worked in IT for a number of years as a DBA, a programmer, a network admin, and all that fun stuff. But started teaching back in 1982 as a Navy instructor. So I did my 20 years in the U.S. Navy, retired out, get a paycheck, all that fun stuff. But I've always enjoyed teaching. So this is what I enjoy doing, and that's why I'm teaching now. So I figure if you love what you do, it's really not work. And this really isn't work. This is fun. So anyway, I am assisted by Odell. Odell, you want to say hi, sir?
Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Welcome back to some of you. Glad to have you. Hope you'll have a fun and mental time learning from John. Thank you.
And the only thing Odell and I would ask of you is if you've got any questions as we're going through the material, please ask. Please let us know what those questions are. One thing I have learned through the years, and that is when one student has a question, chances are somebody else in the room has the same question. So please feel free to ask your questions. Okay. I'm going to stop off my streaming video here just to save a little bandwidth. And so we'll get started. Earlier this week, Tuesday, Odell taught a class where we taught you how to create security related queries. So that's what we did on Tuesday. And then yesterday, I taught the class on Cloud SIEM Analyst. So we taught it from an analyst perspective. Today, we're going to continue on and talk about Cloud SIEM from an administrator's perspective, how to set up our collectors and things like that. In fact, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to click that. In fact, what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about, again, the Cloud SIEM data pipeline, how records become messages and all that good stuff. And then we're going to actually log into the Cloud SIEM and explore the UI just like we did yesterday. But this time we'll do it from an administrator's perspective. I'm going to focus on a few things that the administrator probably cares about. Then we're going to talk about data processing and configuration. And then we're going to do a lab to set up some configuration and ingest some data into Sumo Logic. We'll show you how that works. Then we're going to talk about customizing, tuning, and administering our Cloud SIEM. And for that, we're going to do some labs and create some customized rules. Yesterday, we did a match rule. Today, we're going to do a chain rule and a threshold rule. And we're also talking about how you can customize the action buttons and various other things. So that's going to be our game plan for today. And then, of course, the last hour is devoted for you taking the certification exam. So I'll take the certification exam. One question I have for you, and that is how many of you, show of hands here, raise your hands, we're not in the class yesterday. We're not in the class yesterday. It's no harm if you weren't. I just want to know because it's a matter of perspective as far as teaching the user interface and how much I have to teach and things like that. So that's fine. Thank you very much. We lower the hands and we'll go from there. So we also want to remind you that if you take our certification exam and you pass it today, we will send you a $15 Uber Eats voucher. So you will put this information in the chat box when we get around to the certification exam. And actually this slide is out of date. It should have a form in here. Hang on a second. Let me fix this little problem. Maybe. There we go. Let's update this slide. Sorry about that. There we go. It's a little bit better. You can tell we haven't taught this class in a while. So we wait for the slide loads. There we go. There's a form you're going to fill out. And again, it gets sent to us and we will then process it and do the $15 Uber Eats voucher. One little thing about this form I do want to mention to you. It asks you to, as an optional, to upload a copy of your certificate. Some of you won't have the capability of uploading a copy of your certificate. Don't worry about it. Just send us the form filled out and we will validate it and issue out the voucher. So pretty simple. Keep in mind that it takes us a couple of business days to get this done. All right. Not 48 business days, but it does take us a couple of business days to get this done. So, all right. So here we go into the Cloud SIEM data pipeline. And those of you with us yesterday, you saw this. Our Cloud SIEM product is our security information and event management. That's what SIEM stands for. And it allows us to immediately see the threats that we have to investigate in our operational issues. It is an enterprise grade platform. It is a software as a service. It runs on Sumo Logic, which means it runs on AWS, really. Our environments run on AWS. And allows you to see what's going on with regards to security and operational issues. Okay. Now, again, yesterday you saw this, and those of you who took the test yesterday realized there's some test questions here. And I'm here to tell you there's going to be some test questions on this today as well. So they'll probably give you this diagram and ask you to give you a couple of icons and say, where do these icons go? But you'll see that. Could you copy the link for the form in the upload to upload the certs? Sure. Or hey, we'll take care of that. Yep. We can do that. Yep. Actually, I was planning on doing that when we get around to the exam, but we can do that a little earlier. So thanks. Odell, if you could take care of that, I'd appreciate it, sir. So here we have our normal ingestion process. Those who are familiar with Sumo Logic and data collection and sources and all that good stuff, this is our normal collection process. And we're going to see this in class today. We're going to do a lab where we're going to ingest some messages here. And then once we get those messages in the continuous intelligence platform, we are going to, Cloud SIEM platform, we are going to then parse, map, and enrich these. So what happens is we analyze the messages, we parse certain fields out. Now, what you don't know yet is that we're going to define what those fields are. We're going to define the parsing mechanism that it's going to use. So we'll define all that. And you'll see that when we do the labs here. We tell it what fields to parse. We tell it what fields to map to. And then as far as enrichment goes, you'll find that we can go to things like CrowdStrike and other relationships we have to look up that information. So we've got that there going for us. Thank you, Odell. And that creates our records. So our records are basically broken down messages that tell us, messages that are broken down into records telling us what's going on in our environment. We're then going to take those records and we're going to compare them to a bunch of built-in MITRE ATT&CK framework rules that we have. We've got several hundred rules. I think there's like 697 rules right now. I'm sure there'll be more. But if the rule matches the record, for example, I have a record that says somebody clicked on a phishing email. Well, I have a rule that says somebody clicked on a phishing email. So if that happens, we're going to extract out the entity. Who was it that did that? Whether that was a username, an IP address, a host name, whatever, we're going to extract out the entity, and that's going to generate a signal. And the signal indicates something is wrong. Now, most SIEM solutions stop there. That's where they end, and that's what happens. But our product takes it a step further. We're going to look by entity, and we're going to look at the signals that are generated over a 2-week period. Now, each of these signals has a score value. Each one of these signals has a weighted value. If the weighted value of those add up over a 2-week period to 12 or greater, then we generate an insight. And then it makes it very easy for you to see where your threats and issues and security problems are. And so you can focus on those. And that's basically how the process works. Okay. Again, breaking it down, here we have the Sumo Logic coffee, provides a great cup of coffee. It's a lot like Starbucks, except Starbucks is copyrighted. We're not. Okay. So you can go in there and you can grab a bunch of stuff. Now, what kind of data are we ingesting, right? And it's really funny. You got to maintain an interesting balance here, right? You want to make sure you're getting some data so you can generate insights. If you're not getting enough insights, think about where your data is coming from and more if you can get more data. For example, if you're on AWS and you're dealing with CloudTrail logs, great. If you're dealing with Azure, you've got network monitoring logs, you got event logs, things like that that you can bring in. If you're on-prem, obviously you've got your firewall logs, you've got your various system logs, authentication system logs. So you've got a bunch of logs here that you can get in, and we want to make sure that you get enough data. Now, obviously, we also have to be careful here about too much data, right? Obviously, the more data you bring into Sumo Logic, quite frankly, the more it's going to increase your cost. Okay, we charge based on ingestion. And we also recommend that you may want to partition your data and forward only that what you need to Sumo Logic to make it easy for yourselves. And those of you who've had our administration class, our regular old administration class, you know how you can create partitions and forward that data. Okay. Again, what kind of data do we want? Obviously, data quality does matter, right? We want stuff associated with your firewall, with your logs, with your security, stuff like that. Guard duty is a good source. Windows events are a good source. Also understand whether your data is structured or unstructured. Is it consistently structured message after message, or is it free-form to totally unstructured? So again, we need to understand that, because when we define our parsing, we will specify that. Now that we got this data coming in, we can parse it. And again, we'll see something that looks something like this. It looks kind of like an IP address, right? IP-127-0.0-1. Well, when we parse it, we're going to flip it and turn it into an IP address. We realize it really means an IP address, and we're going to map it to a field. And then we're also going to enrich it. We're going to go out to CrowdStrike and check out that IP address or that domain name or that email address and say, is it a known threat? Does CrowdStrike recognize it as a known threat? We have a relationship with CrowdStrike. Through our tool, you can use CrowdStrike, and so save yourself lots of money. And for those of you who have CrowdStrike, it's not cheap. So we're providing that for you as part of our a way to help you out. Again, these will then generate our records. Then we'll compare our records against our rules. If we have a match, we will extract the entity and we'll generate something called the signal. Those signals are our problems. Those signals are our issues. Those signals are our things. And then we are going to correlate those signals by the entity. So we're going to look by a specific entity over a 2-week period of time to see exactly what's going on. And again, is the score of the various rules is greater than or equal to 12 over a 2-week period of time, we automatically generate an insight. And that's basically how this process works. Now, one thing to talk about theory, it's another thing to talk about it from a practical perspective. So what do you say we go ahead and start talking about our Sumo Logic UI and our Cloud SIEM UI and talk about where things are in different pieces? So if you don't mind, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to skip ahead a couple of slides. I'm going to come back and talk about this, don't worry. But I want you to go ahead and log in. Now, for those of you who logged in yesterday or the day before, we're going to have you log in with a different account. So I want you to fire up your Chrome or Firefox browser, and I want you to go to service.sumologic.com. That's service.sumologic.com. And there, I want you to pick a 3-digit number. If you want to pick the 3-digit number you had yesterday, that's great. But I would like you to type that 3-digit number in the chat box so we know what number you're taking. Okay. It's not significant if 2 or more of you grab the same number, but obviously if 40 people grab the same number, it's going to be a bit of a problem. I'm willing to bet in this class, there is somebody who's always wanted to be 007, James Bond. So if someone wants to grab 007, you are certainly welcome to do it. Please remember, it's got to be a 3-digit number. So put preceding zeros if you need to. So you're going to go in here to service.sumologic.com. And I'm going to go ahead and log out here for a second. So I'm in the same boat that you're in here. Close this up. There we go. So I can sign out. So as we said before, this time we want you to log in with that 3-digit number as training plus admin, not analyst, admin, and then take that 3-digit number. Now I'm going to take 985, and you may ask yourself, why is John grabbing 985? 985 was the whole number of the USS Cushing, which was the last Navy ship that I was on. So, and then you'll add the sumologic.com. So it's an email address, training plus admin with that 3-digit number at sumologic.com. And the current password for this month is capital ADMIN 22 ! Or it looks something like this. Admin 22 ! So when you click on this and you log in, you are able to see and log in and access our Sumo Logic environment. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to make sure everybody's logged in. So I want to make sure everybody's logged in. And if you would raise your hand, that way I know you're successfully logged in. If you're having problems logging in, please let us know. Let myself or Odell know so that we can make sure that you We help you out here. We also enable various microphones. So right now I've got about 6 people logged in out of 19. So I expect that number to be a little closer to 50-50. So now I've got 8. So let me give it a minute. Again, if you're having any problems logging in, please let us know. Okay. Very good. All right. So I want to make sure everybody gets logged in here, because from here on in, I'm going to be pretty much hands-on. I've got 8 out of 18. And again, one other thing I want to do here is I also want to upload your student guide, the lab guide. So if you'll bear with me here a second, I'm uploading the PDF to the chat box, and in a minute, I'll show you where you can get that PDF if you can't download it from here. So if you can't download it through Zoom, I'm going to show you where you can get it in just a minute, where then you can, you can get that guide. And by the way, I've got that guide opened. Here it is. Here are all the exercises that we're doing. I remind you that if you want to, like I said, if you want to go through these labs later, you certainly can do that. All you need is an admin account, right? Training plus admin with that 3-digit number. The current password is admin22 ! That will change on the first Monday in July. I don't know what that password's going to change to, but if you need to, you can send me an email. You know what? I just realized I uploaded the document to the host and participants only. My mistake here, folks. Let's try that again, this time with feeling. And let me also put in here my email address. So if you want the new password when it comes out in July, I don't know what it is right now, but I will know when we release it, what the password is. You can send me an email. So there's my email information. One other thing, Odell, thank you very much for putting in the credentialing information, because I sent that out to host and participants as well. Shame on me. But it looks like we got about 10 people in. I'm going to go with that. So let me lower the hands. Hopefully you all are able to log in. Again, if you're having problems, let us know. But the first thing I want to do before I go back to my slides and talk about the stuff I just skipped, I want to show you a couple of things in here. Okay. So in here in Sumo Logic, as far as accessing our training materials and accessing that lab guide, if you can't grab it from the chat box, if you click on this home tab, and then you click on this certification tab, and you click on this get certified tab. Now, because you're logged in as a training account, training analyst or training admin, you don't see all the 5 boxes that you usually see here. If you logged in with your account, you would see 5 boxes. Because you're logged in with one of the training analyst accounts, we don't want you to take a self-paced course with that account. We don't want you to take a certification exam with that account. That's why you only see these 3 boxes. We've disabled those. Thank you. But if you want to get a hold of our lab guides or any of our recordings or anything like that, where it says recorded live training, you can click on that. And here in recorded live training, you can find the class that we're in right now, which is Cloud SIEM Admin Cert Jam. You can click on that. And of course, you get to register. So you click on the registration button and boom, you're registered. That's it. And here you have our manager, Josh, teaching the class. So here's a recording of that class. Here is the slides for that class. Again, we provide the slides because it is an open book, open notes, open slide type class exam that you can take. And then here also is the student lab guide. And this is what you'll want to download. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this URL and I'm going to paste and put it into the chat box in case anybody needs to get the lab guide that way. Okay. So I wanted to mention that information to you. Any questions so far? Again, you can see any of our classes, any of the things we've got recorded here. You can go in here and, if you want to take metric mastery and it's not on the schedule, you can listen to the recording, do the labs, all that fun stuff. Same with Kubernetes, all that fun stuff. Okay. One other little thing while I'm here, we also talk about access. Actually, no, let's leave this. Let this go. Let me close this up. let me get back to those slides that I skipped. Now, the point is that the slides that I skipped, there are some things in the Sumo Logic user interface, and there are some things in the Cloud SIEM user interface. So we've got two different user interfaces, depending on what we're looking for, depends on what we see. First of all, if you want to set up security and role-based access controls, that's what RBAC stands for, role-based access controls, you do that in the Sumo user interface under administration. And I'm going to show you that in just a minute. Okay. So as far as who can see what inside of the Cloud SIEM environment, this is where you control that. So, and you can set this up however your organization is structured. If you've got tier 1 and tier 2 SOC analysts and you want them to have different permissions, you can give them different rights and permissions. You can create a role for tier 3 SOC analysts and SOC admins, and again, change their configurations as well to give them what specific rights and permissions. I'm going to show you where this is in the tool in just a little bit. The other thing that you'll notice when you log in as a training account, yesterday, those of you with me in the analyst account did not have this gear icon. And so this gear icon denotes that you and I can do certain things. And there's some things that you'll see in that, not many. And again, this can be controlled through those role-based access control right here. You can manage certain things, manage and configure certain things, and I'll show you that in the interface in just a little bit. Okay. You can also control based on role-based access control what content they can see. You may recall yesterday we saw rules, we saw rule tuning, we saw custom insights, but there's a lot of other things here. You can set the role-based access controls for this. So if you'll bear with me just a little bit, I will explain. Now, there's one other thing we've done is we've kind of locked things down a little bit, even for the administrators. So let me stop the slides here. Let me log out as my training admin account that you guys are logged in as. Let me log in with my John Meredith account, which is full administrative rights on everything. So here with my John Meredith admin account, if I open up my navigation panel, let me close this up for a second. Open up my navigation panel if it's not already open by clicking on the Sumo Logic or the hamburger menu. Down here is my main menu. And if I click on administration, I see here I've got account information, user and role information, security information. You don't have users and roles, but here under users and roles, specifically roles, is where I set my role-based access controls. So I could, for example, here create a role, call it SOC Analyst 1, and I could limit what data they can see by putting a filter in here. And then I can decide what permissions, what privileges this role has. So if I scroll all the way down, you'll see here's where our Cloud SIEM environment is. I can click on that Cloud SIEM environment so they can view it. Then I can decide what permissions I want them to have with regards to insights, with regards to content, with regards to configuration. So we create a role and we assign it privileges. Then, I'm going to discard this. Then when we go in here to users and we create a new user, I'm going to create good old Fred Flintstone. There's, I can put his email in there, right? Inabera.com, whatever. And then I can assign whatever roles I want Fred to be a member of. If I want to be a member of SOC Analyst 1, I can do that. So this is our security model here as far as we take and we create these roles, we assign the permissions to these roles, and then we assign the users based on that. That's why we refer to this as role-based access control. Any questions about that? And this is done inside the Sumo Logic interface, not through the Cloud SIEM interface. All right. I'm going to discard for Fred, not create the account for Fred, and off to the races we go. So some things, like I said, are done inside of Sumo Logic. Some things are done in the Cloud SIEM. So let's take a tour here of the Cloud SIEM. So again, if you open up this navigation panel, if it's not already open, just click up here. I'd like you to click on Cloud SIEM Enterprise. And here in Cloud SIEM Enterprise, here is our Cloud SIEM environment, okay? One thing I need to do here real quick is probably shrink things down a little bit. There we go. Shrink my screen down a little bit. So here in my Cloud SIEM environment, I see that the system is online. Here's my time range, 24 hours. There's a selection that I can select here as far as what range I want. Now this range is what's going to feed all my values and all my information here. So I am looking in this case at the last 24 hours. In the last 24 hours, I've ingested 44,000 records. That's down a little bit. I've created 1,000 signals. That's also down a little bit. I've generated 3 insights. That's also down a little bit. I can see how long it's taking us as far as remediation here of remediating insights. So we have a problem, how long it's taken us to resolve it, to remediate it, that sort of thing. And then also here, I can see my insights by status, whether they're, and then you can customize the status. And I'll talk about how we do that a little bit later. I can see a timeline here of, this is my timeline, when the insight was created, when the insight was resolved, all that. This right here is my heads up display. And in my heads up display, I can see the amount of records I've ingested. Those records generate signals. Those signals turn into insights. That's what these red triangles are. These are my insights. I could click on one of these red triangles to take me to a specific insight. Also, here's my latest insight. So I can see that particular insight. All of our insights have numbers. They're generated in numbers, so we can keep track of them. On this insight here on my little crosshair, I have my timeline, which is on my x-axis, and my severity scores, which is on my y-axis. I see this is made up of 3 signals. And if I look close enough here, I should be able to see, here's my first signal, there's another signal, and then there's my third signal. So I can see where these signals are. So we can explore insights in a great more detail, and I'll get to that in another time. Down here is my syslog, so I can see what users are doing and whether they're closing things or moving statuses or whatever. This is kind of my syslog down here. Now, from an administrator perspective, like I said, if I need to get back to the screen, I can click on where it says Sumo Logic in the upper left-hand corner. If I want to look at insights, I can click on my insights and I get a laundry list of my insights, or perhaps I get a laundry list of my insights based on status. There's 2 ways to look at your insights. Bear with me a second while this does its magic. There we go. I can see the status of the various insights, or I can see a laundry list of insights. Okay. I can look at my signals. I can look at my entities, all of that fun stuff. Now, for our purposes as administrators, here is where our content is. And when I click on content, I see all these options. When you click on content, you only see rules, rule tuning, and custom insights. Why? Because my role has more control than your role does. You guys are logged in as a role of training and admin. I'm logged in as a full administrator. Also, because you are logged in as an administrator, you have this gear icon, this configuration icon. And when you click on it, you see a few things. You see log mapping, you see Sumo Logic, you see actions, maybe you see contact actions, but these, I have all of the controls here. You have some of the controls here, so you can see this stuff. Now, this one I need to discuss, and I need to qualify something. We used to put this red gleam, this little red dot on our pull down here, on our help. And so when that red gleam means that we have an announcement, we've updated some rules, we want to communicate with you, that sort of thing. We moved it out a few months ago. So now it's its own separate field, announcements. And so you can click on it and you can see, what have we done? What have we changed? What new rules have we added? That sort of thing. And so when you see that red icon, that red dot, you know we've done an update to your system. And you can look through here and see what we've done and play around and all that fun stuff. Now, any rules that we create, we update. Any rules you create, you get to update. Okay, that's how it works. Now, this red dot, as I said, used to be on this question mark. And the reason I'm pointing this out was this made a great test question. So they ask you to click on the area where what the red dot means. And so in the test, I don't believe we've updated the test yet. You would normally click here for where that red dot is, or you see announcements and things like that. If you do see the bell, click on the bell. The bell is the correct answer. But if the bell is not there, click on the question mark. Okay, that's where your announcements and stuff are. Here under our documentation and our shortcuts and about our system and all that good stuff, right? We can, get that sort of information there. This right here allows me and you to go back to our continuous intelligence platform, back to what some might call Sumo Logic. So I can go back here using that button. Yeah. And then over here, I can see who I'm logged in as. So I can see who I'm logged in as, my browser time zone, that sort of thing. So that's the user interface as far as that goes. Now, one other thing I want to point out to you, and I didn't point it out really well yesterday, so I apologize. And that is if I click on insights, and I'd like you to click on insights. Okay. So if I click on an insight, any insight at all, and if I'm going to click on this first one. Okay. I want you to click on that first one as well. On the left side over here, we have an actions button. And this actions button is what you and I can customize as an administrator. So we can customize this, and I'll show you later. We're going to have a lab on it later, how we can customize it. Additionally, if I go down here to where the entity is, the username is, and if I click on the entity, let me get out of where I am because I'm going nuts here. You'll see there's these little dots right next to the right of the entity name. That is our context action button. And you can customize that as well. So you can customize this context action button and decide what things you want to do to change it. I'm surprised all these things just kind of popping up. They're just annoying me into no end. So, but you can change the context action button. So again, as an administrator, there's a lot of things here that you and I could do. Additionally, when I'm looking at all of my insights, so let me go back here to insights. And where I have these statuses, if I click on this icon here to show status board, you can customize these statuses. So you can, here's your new insights. You can create additional statuses here if you want to, right? If you send that to a SWAT team or a SOC team or whatever, you can add a status for that. Something else we'll talk about from an administrative perspective. So in our lab guide that hopefully you guys all got a hold of and downloaded, we just went through lab 0 where we want you to log in, right? Which we were able to do here, log in. Then we wanted to do lab 1 where we explored the user interface from the administrator perspective. And there's some tips and tricks in here that you guys can use. Now what we want to do is we want to get into lab 2. We want to talk about bringing some data in here from an HTTP source. So let's set up and talk about lab 2. Before I get into lab 2, are there any questions so far? Any questions? Okay. So what we want to do here is we want to talk about how we get data into Sumo Logic, okay? In order to get data into Sumo Logic, there are some steps that have to happen. One, your company gets to purchase the cloud SIEM. And that's going to require a back-end configuration that we have to do. We'll take care of it. You don't have to worry about it. And when we do that back-end configuration, you're going to find in your Sumo Logic environment, bear with me a second, let me go back here. In your Sumo Logic environment, you're going to have this option when we do that back-end configuration. Okay. You don't see that operation, that configuration, because we haven't done the back-end configuration, maybe because you haven't purchased it. Okay. So that's something we have to do. Now, after that, we need to go into your various data sources and we need to tell them to forward their data to the Cloud SIEM environment. So there's a little checkbox that you get to check. You can also do it through APIs. And then also, if we want to set up a new source, then we're going to go in here and define the source, configure our log and ingest mappings, which you'll see us do, about which field do we want to grab, where is that field, so forth and so on, so that we can do that. Some data, we have default mappings that we use, but we're going to take the worst case where you've got to map it yourselves. Okay. Now, when we bring in logs, particularly custom logs and ingest mappings, we have to ask ourselves some questions. Is it data structured or is it unstructured? Because again, we'll handle it differently. Does your data have a syslog header? In other words, is row 1, we want to ignore row 1, the first message. What kind of format is your data? Is it in JSON? Is it in XML? Is it in Leaf? What format is it in? And also, have you done and used field extraction rules that you've applied to these? Field extraction rules is something we have in Sumo that we add the fields to the field browser. If you have those field extraction rules, that's great. It means we're already extracting out those fields, and we can use those fields in our mappings. We can use those. Also, what product and vendor are our messages coming from? Are they coming from Microsoft? Are they coming from Checkpoint? Are they coming from AWS? Or, what product and or vendor are they coming from? So again, vendor, Microsoft, AWS, whatever. Product, GuardDuty, CloudTrail, whatever. What things are these things coming from? Okay. So that's going to take us to our hands-on labs, specifically labs 2, 3, 4, and 5. So let me stop the slides here for a second, and I'd like you to follow along with me. So here in lab 2, we are going to enable data forwarding to an HTTP source. All right. We'll talk about that in just a second. What we want to do, actually, let me go back here. In our Sumo Logic environment, and this is another place we do things inside of Sumo Logic, not in the CSE environment, but in our Sumo Logic environment, if you open it up, and again, if you're not there, if you're already here, just click on this little icon and click on Continuous Intelligence Platform, and it will take you to our Sumo Logic environment. Under Managed Data is where our collectors are. And if you want to learn more about collectors, I encourage you to come back to our regular old admin class. Okay, our regular old admin class. Now, what we're going to do here is this is our collector for our Cloud SIEM environment. This is our collector. And you and I are going to add a source here. So let me go to my directions. Okay. So you and I, navigation panel, click Manage Data, go into Collection. Make sure we're on the Collection tab up here, which I'll talk about. Find the Admin Training SIEM Collector. So here we are. Again, Manage Data, Collection tab, Admin Training SIEM. We're going to click Add Source. And so when I click on Add Source, these are all the different sources that we can add. Now, the source that we want to add here is HTTP. Hang on a second. Just bear with me a second, folks. Right, add source. We want to click on HTTP logs and metrics. And while you can search for this, there they are right there. I could also go ahead and type in here, HTTP, and it will then start filtering things down. So what we want to all select HTTP logs and metrics. Now, as far as the name of your source, we recommend that you put in something with a unique identifier with your initials or something like that. So I'm going to put in here HTTP training data and my initials. And I encourage you to do something like that, HTTP training data with your initials. You can specify a description if you want to. You don't have to. You can. You can specify a source host, but you don't have to. Don't worry about it. You can specify a source category, and we do always advocate as a best practice to use a source category. So I'm going to call mine, and I want you to do the same thing, training with your initials. Training, in my case, JWM. Now, If we want this data to go to our Cloud SIEM environment, remember I told you had to check some checkboxes? Here's the checkbox we want to check. So you want to check this checkbox so it forwards it not only into Sumo Logic, but it takes it into that Cloud SIEM environment. Okay. And then we can also add key value pair fields here if we want to search for them in our Sumo Logic log queries and stuff like that. We can add key value pairs. Maybe I want to talk about business unit. Maybe it's the accounting team or the operations team or whatever, where I'm getting this data from. But you can add fields here that you can search on if you want to. We're going to tell it how to address timestamp information, which we're going to take the defaults here. And again, automatically detect the format of our timestamps. We're just going to take these default settings here. And we are going to click save. And when we click save, it's going to give us a URL that we will need to copy. So you can take this URL and copy it, and then you can paste it somewhere, right? You can bring up some sort of a text editor here, and let's go ahead and grab a new sheet here. I don't think you care about the shows that I watched, and I can paste that in somewhere, okay? So bring up Notepad or whatever you want. Now, if for some reason you just clicked OK past this, it is not the end of the world. Because if you go in here and you find your source, and if you go over here, there's an option that says show URL, and you can show it and copy it and paste it at that time. So what we're doing is we're defined a collector that we're going to use and the various sources of data that we're going to use to test out our information. Now, I also mentioned that if you have existing sources of data that you want to forward data onto Sumo Logic, then you've got to go into those sources and you want to make sure you check this checkbox. SIEM processing, forward it to the Cloud SIEM environment. Okay. And that, folks, is that lab. That is lab 2, I believe. Okay. And there we have it. Now, in lab 3, we're going to test this, and I'm going to warn you. In lab 3, we're going to test this, and it's going to fail. And that, I expect it to fail, and there's a reason why it's going to fail, and I'll explain in a minute why. But what we're going to do is we want you, if you're on a Windows machine, to open up PowerShell if you have it. Or if you're on a Mac, open up Terminal. And we're going to type this command in, but we're going to modify it a little bit. So let me take this command, right-click on it, copy it. Let me, since I'm on a Mac, open up Terminal here. And I'm going to paste this command in. But there's some things that we need to change in this command. Okay. So hopefully you've got PowerShell open or you've got Terminal open. You're able to copy and paste this in. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my cursor back to the threat name. This threat name has some double quotes in it. I'm going to take out the word threat name, and I'm going to put the name of my threat, specifically JWM. Okay. So we want to find the threat name. Oops, hold on a second. Sorry about that. Wrong thing here. Hold on a second, guys. I apologize. You want to keep threat name. Threat name's fine. Threat name is fine. Sorry, guys. It's the attacker name you want to change. Sorry about that. So this is what I want to change. And I want to put my initials. You can put your initials, whatever. So we can say who that threat is coming from. So that's one of the things we want to change. The other thing we want to change is this HTTP source URL. So I'm going to get rid of this, including the brackets. Let me just double check that. And what I want to do is go back to this URL that I copied. I want to copy it. And in my terminal window, I want to paste this. Now, what this command is doing is it's simply doing a curl. It's connecting to a URL. So I'm a local host. I'm specifying the threat name is equal to JWM, specifying the content as JSON, specifying I'm going to use this collector. So this is what it's going to send a message to this collector, this URL. And when I run this and hit the enter key, I'm back to a prompt. So what I've done is I've just sent a record into the Cloud SIEM environment. And we're going to see if that record is in fact there. Any questions so far?
Where can we find that second link, the specific collector sumologic.com link?
Yep. So in your collector, in your collect source here, where it says show URL, that's where that is. You'll copy that and paste that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking. Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to go into the Cloud SIEM environment and we want to see what happened to that record. Now, this is why when we created this source, we added a source category. So I can copy this source category, my source category, if I want. But we're going to go into the Cloud SIEM Enterprise environment. And here in the Cloud SIEM Enterprise environment, we're looking for records. And when I click on records, I don't see any records. Why? Because we've ingested over 40,000 records in the last 24 hours. I don't want to give you 40,000 records. That's too painful. But you'll notice here that I can sit there and specify what I want to search by. And if I click on metadata, it gives me some fields underneath metadata. So for example, if I look under metadata, I can look at metadata source category. It's one of my options. And I can say that it contains or is or whatever. And then I can paste in my source category of my collector. And when I run this, okay, right now it says there aren't any matches for my search. It does take a few minutes for this to happen. Okay, so let me refresh this. It does take a few minutes for this to happen. Let me also just check the directions here and make sure I didn't forget something, screw something up. Okay, no, looks like I'm in. Oh, okay, yep. So it just should, I'm just waiting for it to, it does take a few minutes because obviously it's coming from my computer to wherever this environment is, right? So it's got to go from my computer, which is in New Hampshire, out to whatever AWS environment I'm on, which is in North Virginia, in this case. And so it takes a few seconds for it to get there. And now I see that I do have one record. And I see that the record failed. And the reason the record failed is because I haven't told it what to do with this record. So I remember I told you that when we do this test, it's going to fail. And sure enough, it did. So hopefully you're able to see your records by looking at your metadata, your source category. Okay. Now, what we need to do is we need to fix this. So in lab 4, we're going to define a setup ingest mapping. And in lab 5, we're going to set up the log mapping. So we're going to start and fix this, and then we're going to run it again. And this time it will come in. This time it will work. So how do we set up an ingest mapping? We're going to go into our Sumo Logic, going to go into our configuration, and under integrations, we're going to go in here to Sumo Logic. You should have that option. We're going to click on Sumo Logic, and we are going to create a new ingest mapping. So we'll click the create button in the upper right-hand corner. And we want to specify our source category. So I'm going to paste in my source category, or you can type it in, whatever you want. And then the question is, what format here do I want to use? Do I want to process it with a valid header? Our format here is JSON, so I'm going to use JSON. And then here I've got to specify my vendor and my product. So for my vendor and for your vendor, I want you to type in the word vendor, and I want you to type in your initials. For your product, you would type in product with your initials. Okay. We're specifying the vendor and the product. Pure and simple. Now, obviously, if you know the vendor and the product, whether it's Microsoft as far as a vendor, or AWS, or whoever the vendor is, Cisco, whatever. And then the product, Guard Duty, or whatever the name of the product is, you can specify that. But in our case, we're going to use vendor with our initials. And then here for the event ID, hang on a second. Just give me a second here. Okay, that's what I thought. We'll leave the event ID out of it. And we want to make sure the enabled is thrown to on. So throw the switch to on. And we're going to go and click create. And this is now going to add our Sumo Logic mapping. So now it will receive that record. It will not reject that record, but it still doesn't know what fields to put it with. So for that, so ingest mapping is where we say what data we will accept. And then we're going to go in here to lab 5, and we're going to set up our log mapping. We're going to map the fields. So again, here in my Cloud SIEM Enterprise environment, we're going to go ahead and click on the gear icon. This time we're going to choose log mapping. And we're going to go ahead and we can see all the log stuff we've ingested here and what's going on. We can go ahead and click create, because we're going to create a new mapping. Now, the first question we have to ask ourselves, is this structured data or unstructured data? The messages are structured. They're consistent each and every single time. So we're going to choose structured mapping. And then here we get to give it a name. And per the directions in our book, we want to use name log mapping with our initials. And the reason it's important that you do that is that we're going to remove this after this class is over. So if you use the word log mapping with your initials, we know which ones we've got to get rid of, which ones we added, therefore which ones we're going to remove. Now, again, those of you who weren't with me yesterday, you saw interfaces like this when we created rules and all that fun stuff. Down here, there's this golden triangle, which tells me all the things that I need to fix before I can submit this. So there's data missing here. And we're going to go through here and knock out this data. So when a log from vendor, and this is where we specify our vendor ID and the product ID with a format of JSON. So we want to grab JSON here. And then it says the event ID matches a regex expression. Here, we are going to type in a regex expression. The expression we're going to type in is a period and a star, which basically says bring in everything. Okay, bring in everything. So what we're doing is we're saying, look, here's the criteria. And then we have a choice of record of type, which right now when I click record of type, what I'm looking for here is bear with me a second. Record of type authentication. So record of type, I'm looking for authentication. And then with vendor, match my vendor here, match input vendor. It should. Yep. So what I'm looking for here, match vendor, excuse me. Yeah, I can go with matching input vendor. So when I choose matching input vendor or matching input product, it's going to take these fields from there. Now, it's still balking at me and saying that I'm missing something down here. And I'm missing something very obvious. I need to specify what fields I want to match to what fields. All right. So in this message, if you go back here to my terminal, right, we're going to pass in some fields. And one of the fields we're going to pass in is the IP address. Another field we're going to pass in is threat name. So we want to map those fields in here. So I'm going to go down here and click add. And what I want here is, whoops, hold on a second. Sorry, this is not what I want. Here's what I want. No, I'm sorry. I'm doing this again. Sorry, guys. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right, good. Down here is what I want the mapping fields. Sorry, guys. I got a little carried away. So in the case of our terminal window, the field is called IP. And so if I go in here to my directions, under the fields, we want to type in IP, and we want to marry that field to one of our metadata fields. And the metadata field we want to marry it to is device IP. So if I start typing in DIV, ICE, there it is, device IP. So I'm going to add that field, telling it to look for a field called IP and marry it to device IP. I'm also going to tell it to look for a field called threat name and marry it to threat name. So here we go, threat name. And I want to marry that to threat name. There it is. So I'm basically telling it what fields to use. Now, obviously, I need to go back here to my terminal window because I messed something up. And I realized that my threat name is not right. So let's change that. So it matches it up. Sorry. I should have never changed this. There we go. So make sure things match up, or I could have changed my text. When I'm done down here, I click submit. And now I have done my log mapping. Anything it gets from this source category, it'll pass in vendor JWM, product JWM, and it will now match these fields. So now that I've done my log mapping and I've done my ingest mapping, now I'm ready to test again. So now I'm going to go to terminal. Again, I'm going to tip the up arrow here. And I'm going to hit this. And now this record will actually get applied, but it'll take a few minutes. So again, what I want you to do is rerun this. So here we are in lab 6. I want you to rerun this command. And let's go ahead and take a break. And then when we come back from the break, we'll see where this record is and what this record is doing for us. So what do you say we take a quick 10-minute break? And I got a timer here going. So when we get down to in about 9 minutes and 54 seconds, why don't we be back, and then we'll talk and continue this conversation. So go get yourself some coffee, juice, whatever. We'll see you in just a little bit. Have a good break, folks. Hey, folks, this is John. Welcome back. Steve, you got a question? You had a question in here. When I run the curl command, it doesn't run and prompts quote. Again, on your curl command, sir, it should, hang on a second. Let's see what happened to my terminal window here. Let me open up a new terminal window. It doesn't matter. If I go back to our documentation here, I want to take on page 16, this material right here. I want to copy it. I want to paste it in my terminal window. And I know you have a Mac, so that's not a problem. And then where it has my attacker name here, I want to keep the double quotes, but on my attacker name, I want to replace that with my initials. So again, I'm going to move my cursor back here, arrow back here. And I'm going to get rid of attacker name and type in my initials. And then where it has source URL back here at the end, HTTP source URL, I'm going to get rid of all of that, including the angle brackets. And what I want to do is I want to go into my Sumo Logic environment. So let me go back to my CIP environment here. I want to go into my collection, my managed data collection, where my collectors are. I want to find my particular source. There it is. I want to show the URL. I want to copy that URL. And I want to go back to my terminal window and I want to paste that. Then when you hit the enter key, it should just run and turn you back to a prompt. So that's what it should do. And if you and I now go and look at records, so again, we go back into the CSE environment here, we click on records. And here in our records, we search by metadata tag, metadata source category tag. Bear with me while I find it, source category. And I'm going to use the operator contains, and I'm going to use training/JWM, I think. I should see my record now, and I see that it didn't fail. I see it popped out the IP address. It popped out the classification of authentication. It popped out my threat name. So now my records are properly processed. So Steve, I'm not sure if that helps you or if there's a question or something, feel free to let us know and we'll gladly try to help you. And Jake, let me enable your microphone so you can talk. Okay, great. All right, so that, by the way, is the lab 6. We resent the message, right? Which we did right before the break. And then it does take a few minutes. So that's why I said, let's go ahead and let's step away. And now you and I can go in here and go into our records again, looking for our source category. And this time our message should have gone through, parsing out the fields. And that's how we get data into this Cloud SIEM environment. Questions? One other thing I want to mention for you for the test. Not only can I do it this way, but if I'm also using field extraction rules in Sumo, those field extraction rules will also make it easy for me to get data coming to the Sumo Logic environment. And we teach field extraction rules in the Sumo normal CIP admin class. So if I go back to my CIP environment, those of you familiar with the administration stuff that we do, if I go into manage data, if I go into logs, here's where we can create field extraction rules. And we can use those field extraction rules also for our Cloud SIEM environment as well. So just want you to be aware of that. All right. And that takes care, like I said, of lab 6. Now we're going to have a change of gears. And we did like we did all these lovely labs here. Now what we want to do is have a change of gears, and we want to talk about how to customize and tune your Cloud SIEM environment. So we're going to talk about Cloud SIEM rules. And again, for those of you with me yesterday, you remember there are 4 types of rules, right? A cloud SIEM rule is logical code that deploys based on your incoming records. If the record matches the rule, a rule fires, it creates a signal. A signal is a known, something we need to look into. Okay. Again, custom rules fall into 4 categories: a match rule, which we did yesterday, where a record is based on a simple Boolean condition. A threshold rule, where it's going to match a count of records over a given condition. Good example here. I want to see somebody logged in at least 5 times within an hour, failed to log in 5 times within an hour. A chain rule, which is kind of like multiple threshold rules kind of chained together. So here I want 5 failed login attempts followed by a successful login attempt within an hour. And then finally, the 4th type of rule we have is aggregation. Again, many different connection attempts from a single IP address in an hour. So I can aggregate the records that meet that. Okay. Those are your 4 custom rules, and I promise you'll see a test question or 2 on those. Now, how do we create a rule? Well, that's what we're going to do here in Lab 7. In Lab 7, we're going to create a threshold rule. In Lab 8, we're going to create a chain rule. Okay. So let's go ahead and go into our cloud environments here. Anywhere in our cloud SIEM environment, if you go under here to content, you have the ability to create your own rules. So if you would, under content, click on rules, and you'll see all the rules that we have in here. The ones you created yesterday, we've already removed as a matter of good housekeeping. But if we want to create a new rule, which we do, again, remember, if you create a rule, you're responsible for updating and maintaining it. If we create the rules, we're responsible for updating and maintaining it. And we update the rules at least every 2 weeks. If something more urgent comes out earlier, we will update it immediately. We click create. Again, here are your 4 categories: match, threshold, chain, and aggregation. We're going to focus on a threshold rule right now. So we're going to go ahead and click create. And the first thing we're going to do is give this thing a name. And I would appreciate it if you named it the same way I'm going to name it, because it makes it easy for us to find, to remove. So I'm going to call this a threshold, and I'm going to specify a threshold rule, and I'm going to specify my initials. So I'd like you to call yours threshold rule with your initials. Now, for those of you with me yesterday, you remember that over here was where we created the logic that's going to cause the rule to fire. And then once it fires, this is what we're going to say in the signal. So over here, we're going to have some sort of expression. Over here, we're going to have the results of that expression and where it's going to show up in our logs. Okay. So what we want to do here in our threshold rule, again, we select the threshold. We want to configure if triggered, and then they want us to click show advanced. So here where it says show advanced, if triggered, show advanced, I'm going to click on that, and we want to do it by, it's grouped by use distinct values. So we're going to count only distinct values. We're going to check mark that, say count only distinct values. Okay. So if you want to do a distinct, that's how you basically do it. Now, here in our field is where we're going to write our expression. And in our expression, if you want to, we can copy this code. But there's a little challenge when we copy it. So I'm going to swipe over here on page 19 of the PDF under Lab 7, Step 6, Item B. I'm going to swipe over that. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to paste it. Now, as we mentioned to you in class yesterday, we'll mention to you again today, quotes, when a text editor gets a hold of a quote, it tends to make it a smart quote. The system doesn't like smart quotes. It likes regular text quotes. So I'm going to replace these quotes with regular text quotes. I'm going to simply retype them. They are single quotes. And so now my literal string shows up in red, which is what it's supposed to do. The other thing is I'm looking for a matched event ID of 4625. And I want to see that there's 3 of them within an hour. So I want to change this from 1 to 3, and I could type in a 3 or use the up and down arrows. 3 distinct values, 4 field, and we want to grab the IP address, device IP address, I believe. Device IP address. And if I scroll down a little bit farther here, I should see my time frame within an hour. So I'm looking for this record to occur with the same my device IP address within an hour. For those of you with me yesterday, you learned about rule tuning. Rule tunings are where we can write exceptions to rules. So for example, this rule is going to be effective for everybody, but maybe I don't want it to be affected for my penetration testers. So I could write a rule tuning expression that says, list my rule, my pen testers, and this rule won't fire when my pen testers do this. Penetration testers. So that takes care of my logic of my if triggered. Now, over here on entity, we're talking about device IP. We can type in a summary message here. Users has an event of 4625. Sorry for the cough, folks. So I can put a summary thing in there. I can put a description, whatever I want to here, that's going to read. Houston, we have a problem, whatever. And then I can also assign this thing a score. Now, when you look at assigning it a value, it can read from 0 to 10. 0 to 10. So I can say, based on the severity of this, I want it to be a score of 2 or whatever. And then here we can put in our MITRE ATT&CK framework. So all of our rules share MITRE ATT&CK tactic and technique framework. So here I might want to put in here, users trying to log in, maybe it's discovery. Actually, let me change that. Let me change that to credential access. Okay. Users trying to access their credentials, right? Trying to log in. And I can specify what techniques I want. So again, what different techniques I want to specify here. So we can type in authentication. There we go. So alternative authentication method, whatever. So you can add in what techniques and stuff you want. Now, those of you with me yesterday, we talked about rules. I said always mark a new rule as a prototype. What by checking this, it means that this will not fire off and generate an insight. It could occur lots of times in your system, but it will never ever generate an insight by itself. Okay. So what happens is this gives you a chance to test the rule. You can run it, make sure it's firing, make sure it's behaving properly. Then you can go back in here and clear mark the rule as a prototype, and then it will be able to be used to generate insights. The fear is if you don't mark this, you could obviously start sending your analyst a bunch of insights that may be false based on a poorly written rule. So we recommend highly that every time you create a rule, you mark this and you test your rule and make sure it behaves properly. Now I have added this new rule and I can see if it fired or not. Right now, I just created it, so it hasn't fired yet. But if I go back here to my rules and if I grab another rule, I can see in here when that rule has fired. All these dark circles or lit up circles indicate that the rule is fired. And so I can get a sense for when they fire. I can also put in here, and on this one day, I can see that it fired 56 times, 58 times, whatever. So you can see which rules are firing and that sort of thing. And that is how to write a threshold rule. Now, to write a chain rule, which is lab 8, what we're going to do is we're going to look for 10 records with the expression where they failed to log in. And then we're going to follow it up by one record where they did log in properly. So I'm going to take this code, if you don't mind, and I'm going to copy it here on lab 8, step 6, substep A is an alpha. I'm going to copy that code. Now, to create my new chain rule, I'm going to click create. I'm going to choose chain rule. Again, I would like you to call this chain rule with your initials. That makes it easier for us to find. And so here's where I can define my expression. So if I paste my expression in here, and I'm looking in this case for this expression, I'm looking not when one record happens, but when 10 records happen. So I can use my up and down to specify 10, or I could swipe over it and say 10. And then I want it to, after it finds this, I want to look for one record where, instead of it being false, the value here is true. Okay. So that's going to be my criteria. 10 times they failed to log in, and then the next time they did log in. Okay. And I can group it if I want to. These steps can occur in any order. I can say they occur in a specific order, the order they've been listed here. And then what time frame do I want? So I think I want to change that to within an hour. Okay. All right. Now over here, like I said, I can specify the entity that I want, and I believe this is also going to be device IP. We want to, again, what's the entity? Is it the username? Is it the device IP? What sort of thing do we want here? How do you identify who this is? By IP, by host name, by whatever. Okay. So, and then I can specify a summary where I can type my summary in. I can type my description in. Again, I can specify whatever score I want. As far as the score, the obvious question is, gee, John, is there some sort of recommendation, best practice, whatever to the score? It's really more of an art than a science. So you got to figure out what you want and how severe this sort of situation is for your company. All right. Keeping in mind that when a record comes across this and it generates this hits this rule and it fires and generates a signal, that the score of that signal, along with the other signals based on the entity, if it's greater than 12, it's going to fire off an insight. So if I make this 10, I am very close to firing off an insight. Okay. If I make it 1 or 2, then I'm not so close to firing off an insight. Again, as before, we can add our various tactics and techniques here. And man, we also want to mark it as a prototype, always mark it as a prototype. And then we click submit. And lo and behold, we have now created another rule, the chain rule. And apparently it's now balking at me to log into my Slack. So don't mind that. All right. So there's 2 more things I want to talk about here under configurations. So just a couple of things here to talk about. I'm going to go over here to my configuration icon. In my configuration icon, you and I can create statuses. So if I click on statuses, we currently have new, which is out of the box. We have in progress. We have other statuses. You and I can add a new status if we want to. Maybe we've got a SWAT team that we can send things out to. So I can create a status called SWAT team, and I can put a description in here, and that then adds that as a status. I canceled it, but this is where your statuses come from. So as I said, when I look at my insights and I look by status, I can see my various statuses. So there you go. Okay. Another thing that we can do under configuration is we can specify the actions. So again, the actions show up when you're in an insight. So when I go into an insight, these are the actions that you and I can conduct, we can do. And so you and I as administrators can go in here and we can specify what action we want to take. And fortunately for us, we have Lab 9 where we can customize the action button. So we're going to go in here and customize the action button, and we can create a new action. So what do we want to call this action? Well, we're going to call it custom action with your initials. So because we're going to clean it up when we're all done with this class. And then when do I want it to occur? Do I want it to occur when the insight is created, when the insight is closed, or based on some sort of insight action? Or maybe I want things to occur when the system goes offline, like I want to be notified that the system went down, things like that. Or maybe I want to know when the automatically disabled. By the way, within our product, we also have something called our Cloud SOAR product. Our Cloud SOAR product allows, instead of you and I, the analyst, having to analyze and do all this stuff and everything else, the Cloud SOAR product allows us to apply automation. So we've got a series of playbooks and things that you and I can see and execute the logic and stuff in here. So this is just the first precursor of some sort of automation. Now, in our case, we want to specify on demand here, the notification on demand. And so I'm going to go ahead and choose on demand here. We want to make sure this action is enabled. And then what do we want to do? Do we want to use AWS's simple service notification? Do we want to send an email? Do we want to send a HIP chat? Do we want to tackle something in PagerDuty or notify Microsoft Teams or Slack or whatever? So we want, in this case, to choose an email. Who do we want to send this email to? Well, we want to send this email to maybe our network operations center. Or maybe we want to send it to ourselves. Whatever. And so when I finish filling this information out and I now click create, we have now added this to our actions. And so if I go into a specific insight, any specific insight, doesn't make any difference. Now under actions, I should see here in a minute, might take a minute for it to update, but I should see my thing here. Just bear with me a second, folks. Make sure it gets up to date. Patience is not one of my big virtues. There we go. There's my custom action that, again, is available. And I see some of your custom actions are there as well. So that's how we can change custom actions. So hopefully we've been able to give you a good idea from an insight of an administrator of some of the things that you and I can do. Okay, so we created our various rules, our custom threshold rule. We created our chain rule. We created our custom action button. So what questions have you with regards to this course? Any questions? Well, then let's help you prepare for the exam. All right, let's go out and take the exam. So what I want you to do is I want you, if you're in our Cloud SIEM environment or whatever, I want you to go back to our custom continuous intelligence platform, referred to as CIP, and I want you to log out. Now, why do I want you to log out? Because when you take the certification exam, I want to make sure you, by your name, get credit for it. And by the way, I notice I've got a bunch of tabs here open, okay? So I'm going to close them all up, and just for fun here, I'm going to go to my Sumo Logic environment, okay? My company's Sumo Logic environment. So you want to go to your company's Sumo Logic environment. Oops. And you want to log in with your credentials so that down here in the lower left-hand corner, it has your first and last name. Then what I want you to do is I want you to click on the house tab, home tab, click on certification, click on get certified. Now, because you're logged in as you, not only can you see our certification exams, you can also take our self-paced courses. You can also see this learn a new skill. These are our quick tutorials that you can learn. And of course, you can also see the get certification exams. So that's why I mentioned that these are now turned on for you. As far as the certification exam goes, if we click on get certified, you want to find our exams, the Cloud SIEM administration exam. The one you took yesterday is the Cloud SIEM fundamentals exam. But here's the Cloud SIM Administration exam. If you click on it, again, there's a little registration button. You can click on it. It's absolutely free, no charge. And then before you start, it gives you a little information. You got 20 questions. You're going to have 60 minutes to complete this exam. The pass score is 70%. Now, I'm going to show you something real quick. And again, don't go in here just yet. Just kind of watch for a second. Up here in the upper right-hand corner is where your profile is. And if you want to, you can add your picture to your profile. You don't have to, but you can add it if you want. But here it keeps track of all the exams that you've passed. And you can go into an exam and you can view your certificate, right? Print it out, put it in your I Love Me wall, whatever. And you can also, if you want to, let me scroll down here and actually let me close this up. You can also add it to your LinkedIn profile. So it's going to add it to your certification sections of your LinkedIn profile. Okay. Now, there's a reason why I point this out. Let me go back here. When you take your exam, again, passing score is 70%, 20 questions. Click next. It takes you to your exam. When you take your exam, again, here's your information, 20 questions, 60 minutes, 1 attempt. When you're ready to go, you can start going through these questions. So it says here, match the root privilege to the correct description, okay? So again, to be able to view the Cloud SIM Enterprise, this level is a prerequisite to all the other access levels. That's true, okay? Then you've got insights. This privileges allows users to create access to help analysts perform all that good stuff. And then here, as far as content, remember we had content, we had configuration. Content was about creating rules and custom insights, and configuration was creating about log mappings, customized entities, things like that. So I'm just going to give you that. Again, your questions will come up in a different random order, but chances are you'll see that question again. So there's that question. Okay. This is what I was wondering. We did not update the screen. Remember I told you that we get notifications, release notes, all that stuff. We have a little alarm bell. Well, we don't have that alarm bell in this screenshot. This is an old screenshot. This question needs to be up to date. In fact, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a screen capture of it real quick and let our certification team know that they got to fix this question. Okay. So I'm just going to take a screen capture of that. But the correct answer in this case, is this is where it used to be. So you put your cursor there, and that's the correct answer. That was the reason I was doing this exam, to see if that question was updated or not. Now, when I click next, it takes me to my third question, and I can continue to go through these. But I'm going to sit and say I've had enough fun for right now. And when I say I submit my answers, obviously I'm not going to pass. I didn't answer enough to pass. But I'm going to go ahead and submit my answers anyway, because I want to show you that when you do take your exam over here, you'll see the questions you got right and the questions you got wrong. You won't see why you got them wrong, but you'll see that you got them wrong. And most importantly, remember, for your record to be added to your profile up here in the upper right-hand corner, you've got to click the submit results. So please click those submit results if you pass the exam, so it writes it to your record, okay? If you didn't pass the exam, I don't care if you click on it or not, quite frankly, but I want to make sure, I want you all to pass. Keep in mind that Odell and I are going to be here in case you get stuck on a question. You're welcome to ask us. Gladly try to help you. Our goal is for you to pass these exams. Speaking of passing the exams, one little thing I want to remind you of, and that is if you pass the exam, feel free to fill out this form. By the way, if you took the exam earlier this week, you can, and you didn't fill out this form, oops, excuse me, you can fill it out now. Keep in mind that we can only send out 2 vouchers a day for accounting purposes. But I'm going to put this in the chat box. Looks like Odell already did. Thank you, my friend. And so there's your information about how to get those Uber Eats vouchers. Any questions about the exam? Any questions about anything we've talked about? Well, then on behalf of myself, Odell, and everybody at Sumo Logic, we want to thank you for attending, spending the time with us. Again, some of you have been here 3 days, some of you have been here just today. But hopefully we'll see you in the class again real soon. If there's anything we can do to help you, please don't hesitate to reach out. Just send an email to training@sumologic.com and we will gladly help you. Otherwise, we'll be quiet now. We'll turn off the recording, let you take your exam. Thanks a lot.